please give a warm welcome to some prison reform advocates, Mary Croft and Boz Dreisinger, who are coming out. Come on out. Mark McClure, who's with the Department of Corrections, so we actually have a dialogue today, which should be great. And you go one more over, I'll be right here. Yeah, I want you in the middle, stars in the middle. And finally, Munaj Salahuddin, who has experience in this area and is the chaplain at that prison. We're going to jump right into it. I'd love for you to tell us your experiences in the prison, both the history and what we should know about the conditions, and then we'll have our experts engage.
All right. Like I said, my name is Munaj Salahuddin. I did 26 years in prison, what was known as the notorious Parchman. When I went in, nothing could prepare me for what I went through. I wasn't a saint on the street. So when you commit a crime, you go into a facility, you don't have the expectation that you're gonna be all right. Well, we wasn't all right. Living standards wasn't up to par. You know, there was gang activity. I was running with a gang in the street, so I joined the gang in prison. I went to the familiarity. However, when you talk about inhumane conditions, you really got to talk about the mindset. Because we can make the conditions better, but what we can't do is allow ourselves to spare a lot of control continuously. So at that time, the administration that was at Parchman, they didn't give us the opportunities. I had a life without parole sentence. So I couldn't get a GED at the time. I couldn't sign up for front school because they said, well, you ain't never going home. You're gonna stay in prison. So what does that translate to a person? Y'all don't care. I got a life without parole, I don't care. Let me further tear up this facility. So now, when you talk about being a positive investment in yourself, that's what we have to do. Because the prison itself is just a building, this is just a structure. The real reformation starts within yourself. The real condition starts within yourself. I'm a firm believer in Islam. I'm not trying to proselytize my faith, but scripture teaches me God would not change the condition of a people till people change the condition within themselves. So that's what I did. You know, but today, I'm sitting next to Mr. Mark McClure. The same prison that I did time in, the superintendent of it hired me to come back into that prison to let them know that they have an open door policy. If you invest in yourself and you learn how to be a positive role model in prison, you invest in yourself. You come home, we're going to give you a job. We're not going to tell the people outside to invest in the residents that's in prison. We're going to show you that we invest in them and we're going to give them a job and we're going to show them that, hey, there is a betterment.
Thank you for that. Marcy, tell us about the cases that have been brought, because we have a system where there is supposed to be accountability and oversight. We can debate that, and that's part of why we're here today and looking at improving that. But you've been doing this work, so tell us about that and then we'll get your response.
So 5 years ago is when we first filed the first case relating to Parchman. Team Rock, Rock Nation, Reform, a lot of advocates around the country, experts around the country stepped in to help on that case. You know, like you mentioned, you know what the conditions were like in Unit 29. I think you were even in Unit 29 for a bit. What I saw that day changed who I was as a person. It really did. The trauma, the horror, the lack of food, the lack of water, people weren't being let outside. It was one of the most horrific places I had ever been in my life. And we walked out of there that day knowing that no matter what it took, we had to make a change. And so that case is how we did it. And because of the spotlight that you guys and people like you, Ari, were able to put on that case, change finally came to Parchman. It is not perfect. It is not great, but it is changed. And I appreciate the work that Superintendent McClure has put into the facility. You know, a lot of people don't know Parchman itself is bigger than the island of Manhattan. It's 18,000 acres, and that's what he runs. And so I'm just so appreciative of the changes that have been made. You know, you and I still spar a good bit over certain things, and I'm sure we will for years to come. I know you're thrilled to hear that. But I do think it's important to acknowledge when we do get cooperation from the other side, when we do see change, because if we don't tell truth about that, then we can't expect any change in the future. And so I'm very thankful for you to be here today, for you to talk to this crowd, to tell them your philosophy and what you've done at the prison.
And so with that in mind, let's bring in Mark McClure, Regional Superintendent for the Mississippi Department of Corrections. On the criticism side, the view, the evidence, much of the reporting was about problems in this facility. On the positive side, you're here because I believe you want to work with people and discuss this. So tell us your responses.
So I started at the Department of Corrections in 1998, and I worked my way up through as a director of probation and parole. And when the riots happened, I was on a specialized team. I was over that, so we went there, spent 2 months and 3 weeks, and I saw a lot of things that I knew was wrong. And but I was working for a different part of the agency, so I got tapped by the commissioner to be the superintendent. A little bit of backstory: my dad died in prison, so I knew he wrote every day. He was an educated man. He wrote me a letter, and so I knew everything that was wrong with the prison. I knew what not to do. I knew how somebody shouldn't treat my dad. So my philosophy is these guys that's in prison are my family. I'm there to take care of them. I'm there to love on them. I'm there to give them opportunities. Because if we don't, I knew from probation and parole side that they're coming out. They're coming back to live with us. And so if we don't help them there, we can't expect them to do better outside. And just like giving somebody a job that's been previously incarcerated, I can't tell you that rehabilitation works if I don't believe in it, if I don't show the world that I have faith in my program. And so like the guys, when I got there, it was 300-something guys involved in programs. Now there's over 2,000. There's 2,500 men there. 2,000 of them are involved in some type of program, whether it be life skills all the way through a 4-year degree. So we have to look at them instead of a liability. We have to empower them and turn them into assets, because they are the agents of change. The men that are there that have faith or have skills, whether they're an educator or a pastor, we have to give them that power to help change, because they are the ones that change themselves, and they are the ones that change the prison. Really, my job's pretty easy. All I have to do is say yes, a lot more than I say no.
And Mark, could you speak to us? Go ahead, if anybody wants to respond. Some light applause. Heavier than the applause I got, but that was a low bar. I want to follow up though on that seriously, because when we look at other fields where people lose their lives, if there's a plane crash, it is expected that there will be investigations. People want to know what went wrong. If there's a hospital and too many people are dying under suspicious circumstances, we expect that. I think you know, and people in the room who do this type of work and activism know, sometimes I think it's fair to observe that in policing and the prison system, the same questions, wait, were these needless deaths? What are the facts? Are sometimes met with great resistance from the government leaders. I'm generalizing, but I think there's evidence of that. Do you see that as a problem in part of the system? It sounds like you're trying to react differently. Can you walk us through that, knowing there are people in the room who do that kind of work, not because they want to say all prison leaders or all police are automatically bad, but because they want basic rule of law and human rights protected?
Yeah, I mean, transparency for me is a very big thing, not only for that specific reason, but for the whole prison experience. So if you're not transparent from day one, when a man comes into the prison, if you're not transparent about his whole prison experience with his family, with the courts, with the officers, with the victims, and everybody can't see that whole step, the whole process that he goes through, then you're denying him the ability to grow and to overcome what he did. And so as things happen in prison, it's always been everybody's, they want to shut down. The less we talk about it, it's more damage control instead of fixing the problem. But my process is let's get together and all meet at the table and see what we can do to help each other. Because if it requires more funding, if it requires better resources, if we don't tell that story, then the people don't know. The citizens don't know. They don't know when they, what they need to do and how they need to address it from their standpoint. So that's my biggest thing, is if we don't bring it out into the open, then we'll never fix it.
Yeah, so I think so. I'm sort of the voice of the global movement on this panel, and I actually think it's really fitting because I think it's important to consistently be able to think hyper-locally and also globally at the same time. And I think now more so than ever, given the state of current affairs in the world. And I think it's really important to recognize that what happens on our shores reverberates globally. And this goes back to the very beginning. I run a global prison reform organization, Incarceration Nations Network. We're a network of partner organizations all over the world. And we're operating in a context in which the US practice is consistently considered best practice. So when we are seeing atrocities in our local prisons here, the rest of the world is watching, and this becomes normalized. And for quite a long time, for centuries, the U.S. has been foisting its prison model on the world. Eastern State Penitentiary, if anybody's been to that museum in Philly, there are over 350 prisons that are modeled after it. It was seen as the model for the world. And we continue to do this through various means where we are building carceral states around the world, and we are that quote-unquote best practice. So as I'm listening to you all talk about what happened in Mississippi, what continues to happen on our shores, we need to keep in mind how much impact this has on the world. And we also need to think about, as well, I mean, just to give you a snapshot image of just how dire the scenario is globally speaking, we're talking about prisons. My last 2 weeks kind of sum up a bit of the problem of this. I came off a plane this morning at 2 a.m. from Kingston, Jamaica, where we have a prison-to-college pipeline initiative in collaboration with the University of the West Indies. We're talking about a prison that's from the 19th century. There are no toilets in the cells. There is nobody. Basically, you're out of the cell for a couple hours of the day, and that's about it. It's a very dramatically bad scenario that is common throughout the global South, where you have people who are incarcerated sleeping in shifts, the majority of the population not being convicted of anything and awaiting trial on average for 6 years in many of the countries, and often much, much more than that. I've been in prisons in Brazil, in the Philippines, where you're talking about 25, 26, 27,000 people in one facility. So really, really dire circumstances that are life and death, and very, very little oversight. And the oversight reality, there's the occasional lawsuit. Even if the lawsuit is won, most of the time people don't actually get what they're owed. So if someone sues, they might win, but the government is not giving them a payout of any kind. So on a state level, there's little that can be done. Last week, I was at the United Nations with a team of ours holding the first ever formally incarcerated panel on education, not incarceration, at the UN. And the UN has the Nelson Mandela rules that govern prison conditions. It has a number of other the Bangkok rules that govern specifically how women's prisons should look, but the UN has no teeth. It cannot enforce any of these things. So there's really no international body with any power that can come in and say, this is a basic standard, this is a radical human rights violation. And that is the state of affairs that we operate in.
Well, I think it's fascinating to hear the impact that prison conditions in the U.S. have on global prison conditions. And that's something that I certainly never thought about. I know when I first got involved with Parchman, some of the experts that we had told us it was the worst prison they had ever seen. And they were shocked that it was in the United States. You know, Superintendent McClure has a phrase that he uses, and I'm going to steal it, and I really would like for you to talk about it more than anything, and that is, the sentence is the punishment. And I think we need to let that sit in, because it's true. You know, whether you're sentenced for a year, 10 years, or 20, you're away from your family. You don't have the ability to support yourself. You don't have the ability to feed yourself. You don't have the ability to protect yourself. The state, the government has taken all of that away from you. That is your punishment, not being tortured by not having, you know, food, water, electricity, or conditions that are basic and normal to humanity. So I really like that that's your phrase, and I thought perhaps you might want to address that with the crowd.
Yeah, so the whole vision of mine is the sentence is the punishment, because they can't go home. And that's the biggest thing. So now I'm their home, and I have to provide. And I know they say the state and all that, but I mean, it really is on a personal level with me. And so each one of the guys, every time I talk to them, I tell them I love them, and I mean it. But the thing is I have to give them something every day to look forward to. And that's the one thing that I saw and I see over and over through all the places I've been in the United States to the prisons, is there's a lack of hope. And so if I don't do anything every day, I give somebody hope. And I try to give every man there hope every day, that they can not only change themselves, but they can go back home and be with their family, and their family will love them. And that's my biggest thing.
And Munaj, can you speak to the differences you've seen, the time you spent in there, which you alluded to, the cases and some of the contraband videos that were revealed showed these problems, the over 100-degree conditions. In prior years, we've had panels where we really went into depth on that because it was so bad. Some of that has been improved, but tell us, as a participant, as an eyewitness, what's changed and what, if anything, still needs to change in your view?
What needs to change is complement of the policies and programs that we implement into the prison system for the residents. When we educate these men, we need to have something to complement their success, and that's freedom. A lot of these sentences that these guys have are mandatory sentences. One guy, John Shea Bell, has a 95-year sentence, and he was a juvenile when he committed this offense. So John Shea's not worried about the air conditioning, because Parchman teach you how to have the trade of HVAC. So he can go to school and learn that trade and go back and fix it in his unit. What he's worried about is getting back home to his wife, his children, and having a meaningful second chance at life. So when we talk about all of the videos that we just saw on social media, it was bad. You can't deny that. But we can't focus on what was. We have to focus on what we can do to make sure that never happens again. Rock Nation, I take my hat off to them. When they filed the lawsuit, you know, this administration wasn't in. But when this administration came in, they made sure that those things that they saw, it disgusted these people. I'm telling you, it really pulled at their heartstrings, like, man, really? Was y'all letting this go down like this? So they make every effort now to make sure that never happens again. So for the guys that serving time, their voices, when I go in and I teach and I preach and I pour into these guys and I hug and love on them, that's the hope that he's talking about. When they see me come in, that's what they see. Hope, inspiration, love, because I'm still on parole. Why is you coming back in here, bro? Ain't you on parole? Yes, I'm on parole. But the bigger thing is, y'all don't need to lose hope. Y'all need to invest in each other, you know? Because see, when the administration see that all of their efforts are really resonating within the residents, that makes them go harder. That makes them go to the legislation and say, look, we need these laws changed because these men have become mentors in prison. Let's complement that with freedom.
And Marcy, beyond the direct action and the lawsuits, what are those laws, state or federal, that you think are necessary for the next change, for the future?
He knows exactly where I'm going to go with this, which is I'm so excited to hear about all of the training that now occurs at Parchman. Like you just said, you can go and get trained in HVAC. You can go, there are all kinds of jobs and things that you can train for. And in fact, I remember one of the times Superintendent McClure was, we were going around the facility and there was a new $2 million building that had just been built mostly by people that had been trained in the new programs in Parchman. And he said, see, we saved the state $2 million. This is why this training is good for the state. This is why, you know, that's what he usually tells the people that come, which is great. But I said, Mark, the 6 guys that built that facility, they still have $30,000 in fees and court fees they owe the state. Like, they didn't get paid to do that labor, and they didn't get their debt reduced. So if you ask me what's the future, I think it is fixing those little holes in the system. It's making sure that we are not just giving people opportunity, but that we are giving them the chance to pay off their debt, to get out, to be free when they are out, and then to take the changes that are occurring at Parchman or any other facility where they're actually good and make those systemic. You know, my biggest fear is that something happens to Superintendent McClure or some of the other leadership that now have this attitude. And even though evidence shows us, even though I know you've got some universities in there doing studies on the changes that you're making, and even though there's evidence to show that those changes are occurring, they still haven't been made systemic. We still haven't codified it throughout the system. So I think working together on what language can we put in a law to help you, you know, buy used trucks or do whatever you need to do at the facility, and then what can we put in place to make sure that the good things that you're doing last beyond you and last and extend beyond Parchman.
Mark, do you want to respond?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a lot to hear. It's me, but it's not really me. And I go back to the men and empowering the men, and that's all you have to do is say yes. And it's the education side of it is we can't keep locking people down, and we can't keep being punitive. We have to be opportunistic and take what they have, the abilities they have, and the things that we already have in place. It's just like the prison to college pipeline. We have these things already in place, and we just have to make sure that the men, especially that, because we saw it in probation and parole, and I know we're not on the probation and parole panel, but I would see a man come out and he owes child support and court fines and fees and all this stuff, and he has no other choice but to go back to the life of crime that he knew to make money. And so we have to figure out a way to fix that in prison. So, you know, I'm not going to go too deep in my faith, but God's got me here for a reason, because I keep getting changed positions to better help these men be productive. Because like I said, I know they're coming home and they're going to be my neighbor, and there's nothing better to me than to hug a man who's made a change in his life. He don't have to be free yet. He can still be at the prison, but the things that we got to do is get the world to see, to get the legislators to see, and the citizens to see, these are people that we have to invest in. We have to, because we can't lock them all up. And that was the past history. You know, it's historically in Mississippi, we had the 85% law in the 90s, and that was tough on crime, and they locked up everybody 85%, and now we're down to 50% and 25% because we see, oh wait, we can't do that either. So I think we have to do this way. I think we have to give them a chance. We have to do like what he's talking about, a 95-year sentence. What is he going to do? Why should he try? Why should he care? Why should his family care about what I'm trying to do? Because we don't care about him, and so we just have to all, just like this panel, we have to all get out with each other and say it out loud where everybody can see. Because if we don't, then the story never gets told, or it gets told a different way. And the truth is, I love the guys. We all are interested in their well-being, and we want the best for them. And so we just have to all get out and talk about it.
I have to say it's beautiful to hear about the university program, and it's always a joy when a superintendent of a prison anywhere comes running up to me, as this gentleman did, and says, hey, I want to talk about the prison to college pipeline, and actually shout. I think there's at least one prison to college pipeline graduate in the room, so shout out to him if he's here. But I think one thing that I would encourage people to do is to be vigilant and to watch the global space. I think a lot of people have suddenly, with the scenario that happened involving El Salvador recently, a lot of people sort of woke up and started looking around globally a little bit more. But that is not a new thing, these conditions of confinement globally and our relationship to them. We have to watch these things. And again, being mindful of our role as, quote, role models and ambassadors of mass incarceration, sadly, in the world. Shortly after the scenario in El Salvador, France announced that it was going to start sending people to prisons in French Guyana and build a kind of prison colony there where there used to be one. So when we do things, we embolden the world to do them in all kinds of ways. And the other thing to keep in mind too, and this is again around advocacy efforts to keep in mind, the elimination of USAID and US foreign aid is having dramatic effects on the world. And a lot of Americans on our shores aren't aware of how much that is decimating the space in terms of work that's being done globally to support these dire conditions. Around the world, you as running a prison in the US, you have a programming budget to work with. Globally speaking, in the global south, there is no such thing. Corrections is the bottom of the budget. You get bare bones minimum to just keep a facility open, that's it. And then you rely on volunteer labor and NGOs to do the programming work. And obviously we know that's not sustainable, and it creates for dramatically bad conditions and very few, if any, opportunities. So where do those opportunities come from? A lot of those opportunities come from US foreign aid supported nonprofit organizations, which have all been eradicated of late. And so I would just encourage everyone to ensure that your activism is not limited by borders, that you're thinking about this work globally, that you're recognizing that the kinds of conditions that we are fighting on these shores exist globally and are very much impacted and shaped by our policies and our practices over here.
I want to do a final question coming down the line, about a minute each, if we can hit that for final thoughts. And given what ROC and UJC have set out to do here, and I've been involved for a couple of years, we're trying to take what's already been proven and known and do things with it, which is different than debating it or making content out of it or a lot of the other things that pass for what people might think are activism. And so the final question for people watching back around the country, if they're watching online or in the room, what's something tangible out of this process that people can take with them as an example, as a template, as something that works? I'm going to start with Minaj, and since this is the final question, I'll also give you my answer. Having covered Parchman for years and having practiced law myself, the lawsuits worked, just as they have in the area of police brutality. They don't bring back lives that are lost, and they don't bring back time, because there's no human who can do that. But having covered it, I would observe that having those suits as a hook has created evidence, legal pressure, and then the government in some cases responds. So you have a track for that. So that's one thing, I'll start with the obvious one, but that's one thing that's worked. And so people who want to support that effort or get involved, whether that's volunteering or supporting or publicizing, that's something that's worked. I want to go down the line a minute each if we can, starting with you.
A minute, wow. So what I would implore the people that's listening, watching, and that's here, if you really care, take action in the mindset that you have. If you can go visit a prison, if you can talk with a person to hear their story and see they change, and then do something about it. Don't point the finger, bring your resources to the table and contribute.
That wasn't a minute. Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing, if you take anything back with you, is just don't give up hope on these guys. Whatever you've got to give, whatever your specialty is, even if you don't think you have a specialty, you may know somebody that has the potential to come in and help, because I can't give everything. I mean, we don't have enough employees, but we have all of you that can help in many different ways. And it could be so much as, and this is small, but so we have guys in there that don't have parents. And so when they graduate, they don't have family that wants to come visit them. So I've started a surrogate brother, dad, whatever, where staff and volunteers from the community come in. And so when that person graduates, they actually have somebody sitting there to clap for them. So don't ever give up hope on, if you know somebody incarcerated or whatever, don't give up hope on them. Become that person, become that advocate, become that volunteer that can come in and help me help these men. And then, because the more people that come in and see, I do a lot of tours at Parchman. If you want a tour, contact me, we'll set it up. But the thing, because I want to show everybody, and I want the men, most importantly, to see that I trust them and I have faith in them, and that they are rehabilitated, and that people can come in without being afraid. And I'm gonna tell one little thing about, I opened the door one time for somebody, and they wouldn't walk through the door, and I learned later that they were scared to walk through the door because of the way Parchman used to be. But now they'll go through the door in front of me because I was being a gentleman, but they thought I was tricking them. So
I thought you were trying to kill me.
So
let's be fair.
So that's what I want you to see, and that's what I want people to see. And I think that's, like I said, don't give up hope on these guys. Reach out to your local prison, see what you can do, because not only will you get to go in, you'll get to see for yourselves. And like he said, don't point the finger if you see something wrong. Ask them how you can help. So thank you all, and I appreciate you. Don't give up hope.
So I would add to that, hire formerly incarcerated people if you're hiring, if you know people hiring. I mean, I always have someone in my life who's looking for work. So you can see me afterward personally if you are hiring, but that's a tremendous need. And then it's kind of a corny phrase, but we talk about each one teach one. It's real. And at Incarceration Nations Network, we often say that culture eats policy for breakfast. In other words, you can change all the policy in the world, all the lawsuits in the world, but if the culture doesn't change along with it, then we're not winning. And and the policy often isn't enacted properly, if at all. And so what that means is, do not be afraid to speak up when you hear inhumane language being used around people impacted by justice systems. When you hear excessively punitive talk, speak up and educate the people around you. And I would say from a transnational perspective, we're in New York City. This is an international capital of the world. We are deeply connected around the world to other people. Lots of people sitting here watching, I'm sure, have family in other countries. Don't limit your efforts just to this one, to this country. Engage your family, your relatives, your friends overseas in these conversations, because I can tell you, in the US, we have a movement. We have this conversation on the table in fancy places like the Shed. We have a lot of work to do still, of course, but we have this movement, we have this platform, and we're having these conversations in big, important places. Globally speaking, it is not happening that way. So if you have connections overseas, spread the wisdom, spread the conversation, and don't be afraid to really speak up and to challenge other people respectfully on their viewpoints when they're not when they're not making sense to you.
Well, I'm a recovering trial lawyer, so sue. That's the easy answer. It works. Ari's right. But I would also say, after you do that, look for points of agreement. I can find a million things that Superintendent McClure and I disagree on, maybe 1,000,001. But there are a significant number that we actually agree on, and I don't care who has the idea. I don't care what path they walk to get there. I don't care what religion they are or what God they pray to. If they are going to make things better behind bars, if they are going to make things better in that system, then we need to listen. So I would say look for places where you can find agreement with those in power, and let's make those changes now, because every little baby step gets us closer to where we need to be.
Join me in welcoming and thanking all of our great guests who came here on this important panel. Thank you very much.